let's dive into one of the most powerful forces that shapes our world, and yet it's almost totally invisible. We're talking about stories, and it's all built on this one simple but kind of dangerous idea. Whoever controls the narrative, well, they control reality itself.
You know, stories feel so natural, right? They help us make sense of everything and figure out where we fit in. But what if they're doing a lot more than just describing our reality? What if they're actively building it, brick by brick, belief by belief?
And that right there is the big question we're exploring. Are these powerful stories a doorway to understanding, to connection, or can they become a kind of prison, a rigid cage that limits what we can see, what we can think, and even what we're allowed to feel?
To really get this, we've got to understand just how deep these stories go. We're not talking about fairy tales here. We're talking about the very bedrock of our entire civilization. Okay, so this brings us to this really cool idea of a layered reality from the historian Yuval Noah Harari. On one level, you've got objective reality, things like gravity, biology, stuff that exists whether we believe in it or not. But then there's this other layer, and honestly, this is where all the real power is. Money, nations, human rights. I mean, these things totally govern our lives, but they only exist because we all agree they do. They're just powerful, shared stories.
So here's the kicker. The power of a story isn't about whether it's factually true. Its power comes from getting everybody on the same page. A border is just a line on a map. Until people believe in it so much, they're willing to fight and die for it. A dollar bill is just a piece of paper until we all agree it has value. That collective belief is what makes the story real.
But here's the catch, and this is a huge warning from the political philosopher Hannah Arendt. The problem isn't that we live by myths and stories. That's just what humans do. The real problem, the danger, is when one single story gets a monopoly, when it shoves all the others out, starts replacing factual truth, and demands total belief. That, she says, is the moment freedom starts to die.
So if stories are that powerful, it's absolutely no surprise that institutions, we're talking churches, governments, you name it, have always wanted to control them. And they do it by carefully choosing which stories get told and, just as importantly, which ones get buried, all to lock in their own authority.
You see this selection process all through history. Take religion, for instance. The historian Elaine Pagels points out that the story that became Christian orthodoxy wasn't chosen because it was more true or spiritual. It was chosen because it was better at building a centralized church. Same with history. As historian Howard Zinn argued, the official story is often this clean, heroic tale of the winners, totally erasing the messy, complicated, and often painful reality for everyday people.
And man, this is something George Orwell just got. Controlling the past isn't some dusty academic exercise. It's about controlling the very lens through which we see the world right now. It's about justifying the power structures of today by curating the stories of yesterday. Here's the thing, though. You can't just delete a story and expect it to go away. The psychologist Carl Jung warned about this. He said that suppressed narratives, they don't just die. They go underground. They fester in the shadows of a culture. And sometimes they bubble back up as chaos, as extremism, as social problems the dominant story just can't make sense of.
Okay, so let's fast forward to today. The tools for controlling the narrative aren't just pulpits and printing presses anymore. Oh no, they've evolved. Now they are invisible, they are automated, and they are deeply, deeply personal.
And to get what's happening now, you have to know this term, surveillance capitalism. Shoshana Zuboff came up with it, and it's a total game changer. It's a new kind of economy where our personal experiences, our clicks, our likes, our fears, our hopes, are the raw material. We're not the customer anymore. Our behavior and the power to change our behavior is the product that's being sold.
The way it works is, well, it's pretty simple, but it's also completely devastating. The system's only goal is to keep our eyes glued to the screen, maximum engagement. And to do that, it pushes stories that aren't tailored for truth or for social good, but for whatever gets the biggest, angriest reaction. Outrage sells, division gets clicks. And the result? Our shared sense of reality, the common ground we all need to function, it just splinters and erodes.
You know, Neil Postman warned us about this decades ago, and it is just chilling how right he was. This new form of control, it isn't like the old-school iron fist. It's seductive. It shows up disguised as entertainment, as convenience, as a personalized feed just for you. We're so busy being amused and engaged that we don't even notice that our version of reality is being quietly built for us. And this really gets to a core idea from Noam Chomsky. The most effective kind of power is the kind you can't see.
when the manipulation is so subtle that we think we're making all our own choices, that we feel totally free, well, how can you possibly resist? It's control that doesn't even feel like control.
Okay, so we've looked at society, at history, at all this crazy new tech. Let's bring it all the way back home. Because every single one of these huge, grand narratives has to pass through one final gatekeeper, our own minds. The battlefield is inside us.
This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? After all the outside forces, all the algorithms and institutions, who's the final author of the story we tell ourselves, about ourselves? Is it us, or are we just playing a part in a script someone else wrote?
You know, we hear this all the time in self-help circles, right? Rewrite your story. But thinkers like Carl Jung and Brené Brown, they offer something a little deeper. See, rewriting can often mean just censoring the ugly parts, polishing our image, and running from discomfort. But they argue that true strength, true healing, comes from integration. That means having the guts to be honest, to confront the parts of our story we'd rather hide, the shadow, and tell the whole messy truth. That's where real power is.
And this leads us to just one of the most powerful ideas about human freedom, from the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl. He realized that even in the absolute worst circumstances, when everything is taken from you, you still have one last freedom: the power to choose the meaning you give to your experience. It doesn't take the pain away, but it can redeem it.
So what do we do with all this? How do we actually navigate this world of stories? Well, the thinkers we've talked about actually give us some pretty powerful tools. First, develop narrative literacy. Learn to see the stories all around you as constructions, not reality itself. Practice independent judgment. Think for yourself, like Arendt said. Confront your personal myth. Get brutally honest about the story you tell yourself. And finally, make room for mystery. Any story that claims to have all the answers is probably a prison.
So in the end, the goal isn't to find the one perfect story or even to try to seize control of the narrative for ourselves. The real challenge and the real path to freedom is so much simpler. Just stay aware. Stay conscious of the stories you're living inside of and ask yourself, are they serving you or are you serving them?
And that brings us full circle. Back to this really beautiful thought from Karen Armstrong. The point isn't to live without stories. That's impossible. It's about learning to hold them lightly. It's about remembering that every narrative, every belief, every myth, it should be a doorway that opens us up to curiosity, to compassion, and to each other. It should never, ever be a prison that locks us in.